Hello, I'm Alyson Grange. A very warm welcome from Durban, South Africa. We get you the news and the newsmakers from Africa. South Africa goes to the polls on the 29th of May. I will track the election and bring you ground reports. Is it the end of the road for the African National Congress? And will former President Jacob Zuma stage a dramatic comeback? From elections to climate change, to innovations and opportunities. As the world's attention shifts, we report from Africa, the heart of the global South. Join me every weekday live on First Post. Hello and welcome to First Post Africa, where we get you the top stories from the continent and from across the world. I'm Alyson Grange, coming to you live from Durban, South Africa. First, let's take a look at the headlines. Leaders of the Iran-led axis of resistance, including Hamas, Houthis and the Hezbollah, huddle in Tehran to discuss the war in Gaza on the sidelines of President Ebrahim Raisi's funeral. Donald Trump says he will use his relationship with Russian President Putin to get U.S. reporter freed from Russian prison. The Kremlin, however, denies Putin having any contact with Trump. Political leaders in the United Kingdom kick off 6 weeks of campaigning after Prime Minister Rishi Sunak announces general elections to be held on the 4th of July. French President Emmanuel Macron says thousands of military reinforcements will stay in New Caledonia for as long as needed to quell the unprecedented insurrection in the French territory. At least 9 people killed and over 50 others injured after a stage structure collapses at a campaign event for Mexican presidential candidate Jorge Alvarez Maínez. We will bring you all the election updates. Hello and welcome. Starting with our top story, it is the final countdown to the general election in South Africa. Now, the May 29th election looks set to be the most tightly contested since the end of apartheid. So who are the key faces in South Africa's general election? Let's take a look. Starting with Cyril Ramaphosa of the African National Congress. 71-year-old Ramaphosa is hoping for another term as president. He rose to prominence in the 1980s as a union leader. In 1991, when he became an ANC Secretary General, he was a leading negotiator in talks with South Africa's then white minority government that led to the end of apartheid and the beginning of democracy in 1994. In 2017, he took over as the ANC leader and as president in 2018. Leading the party to victory in the 2019 national election. In 2022, Ramaphosa was embroiled in a scandal after the theft of over $500,000 in cash from his farm, which raised questions about the origin of the funds. But he still won re-election as the ANC leader that year. Ramaphosa denies any wrongdoing and has so far not been charged with any offence. Ramaphosa and the African National Congress have been under immense pressure. High unemployment, corruption allegations, and frequent power cuts have reduced its popularity. But the ANC is promising to turn this around. It has promised to create millions of jobs over the next 5 years, to boost investment, support private sector, and end corruption. Next is Jacob Zuma, who Ramaphosa had replaced as the ANC leader in 2017 after a corruption scandal. The 82-year-old former president is a veteran of the anti-apartheid struggle. Zuma was jailed for 10 years with Nelson Mandela by the white minority regime. Over the years, Zuma rose through the ranks and became South Africa's president in 2009. But in 2018, he was forced to step down owing to a public inquiry into government corruption. He was sentenced to 15 months in jail in 2021 for defying a court order to provide evidence. The veteran leader, however, is now openly hostile to the ANC leadership. He has thrown his weight behind his newly formed MK party, which is named after the ANC's former armed wing from apartheid years. In the latest, Zuma was barred by court from running for parliament due to his prison sentence, but his name will still appear on the ballot paper as leader of the MK party. In its manifesto, Zuma promises employment and free education to the country's youth. He also pledged to change the constitution to restore more powers to traditional leaders. The third key face in South Africa's political race is John Steenhuisen. The 48-year-old is the leader of the opposition Democratic Alliance. Steenhuisen has been active in politics from a young age. At 22, he was elected as a DA city councillor in Durban. He then became a member of the Provincial Assembly in KwaZulu-Natal before entering National Assembly in 2011. In 2019, he became the party leader after two of its most senior black leaders resigned, one of them citing difficulties expanding the DA's appeal beyond its traditionally white base. But Steenhuisen rejects criticism that the DA is a party of white privilege. However, he still faces skepticism over who the party truly represents. The Democratic Alliance promises to liberalize the economy, including a greater move towards privatization. Steenhuisen has vowed to create 2 million new jobs, end power cuts, and halve the rate of violent crime. Another face in the election is Julius Malema. Often labelled a firebrand, Malema is a former leader of the ANC's youth wing. He was suspended in 2011 by the party's disciplinary committee, after which he set up the Economic Freedom Fighters, or the EFF, which advocates seizing land from white farmers to redistribute to black people. Apart from politics, this firebrand leader's penchant for flashy cars, gold watches and other trappings of wealth is also well documented. In 2015, a court threw out money laundering charges against him because of delays. Julius Malema and the Economic Freedom Fighters are to address unemployment and inequality. The EFF has radical economic solutions. It wants to redistribute land to the less well-off. It also wants to nationalize mines, banks, and other key parts of the economy. Nearly 28 million South Africans will vote in the upcoming election. Opinion polls say the ruling African National Congress may lose its majority for the first time after 30 years in power. The African National Congress is still expected to win the largest share of the vote, so President Cyril Ramaphosa is likely to remain in office, unless he faces an internal challenge within the party. If the ANC falls short of a majority, it will have to negotiate a coalition. It could even form a deal with other smaller parties, depending on the share of votes that it gets. Now, earlier today, I spoke to Narend Singh, the National Campaigns Committee chairperson and the Treasurer General of the Inkatha Freedom Party. Narend Singh, who is also the Chief Whip of the IFP in the National Assembly, says the 29th of May election is the most crucial for South Africa since the dawn of democracy. He also elaborated on South Africa's future with coalitions at the national level and the key issues this election. Here's the full conversation. Considering the elections are just more than a week away, how do you see the national picture evolving for the IFP, and what role do you envision the party playing in shaping South Africa's political landscape?
Oh, thank you for that question. It's just 7 days to go, and it's going to be D-Day for many of us. This is going to be a very, very interesting election since the dawn of democracy in 1994. Because of the split in the African National Congress, the fact that many new parties have come on board, and many new leaders who belong to prominent parties have now formed their own parties. So I think after 30 years, this is really going to be the litmus test for South Africa as we move forward. For the IFP, we are pretty confident that we will do much better than we've done before. And that's born out of the fact that our rallies have gone on very well. Our message has been well received by the public, and by and large, the groups that we try and entice to vote for us are fed up with the ruling party and the lack of governance and the corruption and the load shedding, and there's so many other things, and they're looking for an alternative. And we are pleased to say that they are looking at us as that alternative for South Africa.
Could you elaborate on the party's policy towards forming coalitions at the national level, especially in light of the current political dynamics, as you've just laid out?
Yeah, coalitions are here to stay, and like in India and in Germany and many other countries, you'd find that the major party does not become majority because they have 50% plus one, but they work with other parties who have common values, common aims, a common vision to ensure that service delivery is utmost in their minds, and that the public and the constituencies benefit from the kind of good governance they offer. So for the first time, I think South Africa is going to go into coalitions at a national level. We've got coalitions at the local government level, but all predictions are that the ANC, who have been the majority party for a number of years, for the last 30 years, will dip below 50%, and they will be looking for partners. We, as the IFP, we formed a loose alliance with 6 or 7 other parties where we share common values. We are in opposition to the ruling party at the moment in the national government. And hopefully, if we can get 50% plus one, it's called the multi-party charter, then we will form the government of the day.
What are the key issues that the IFP is focusing on in these upcoming elections, and how does the party plan to address the numerous challenges that are being identified as most critical by your constituents and supporters?
Well, I think one of the big issues that's impacting on South Africa at the moment is the question of unemployment. And growing the economy is one of the cornerstones of our manifesto. And the way you grow the economy is for government to ensure that the environment for the private sector to invest is conducive. You have good roads, you have good ports, you have no load shedding, you have electricity available, you have regulations in place that would make it easier for businesses to start up, whether it's large business or small and medium enterprises. And I think our government has failed us in that regard. The ANC government has failed us in that regard. Then educating our communities. I think in the last 30 years, the ANC government has not done justice to the millions of South Africans who fought hard for this democracy in ensuring that the type of education that's meted out is one that can compare with standards not only across Africa, but internationally. And if you don't have a society or don't have young people that are educated enough in skills that the country requires, then we're going to find this high rate of unemployment increasing. So that's another area that we're going to focus on, is unemployment. And then there's the issue of the provision of water. I mean, as we speak, I mean, South Africans are really in many parts, including large metros like Johannesburg, complaining about the fact that there's no water. And we have water. government and its agencies are not ensuring that the water is reticulated and when you open your tap you get water. We've allowed infrastructure to crumble to such an extent that that is the cause of many of our problems. So we would say that we want to invest in maintenance of infrastructure. A number of other areas, safety and security. I mean, many South Africans and non-South Africans who want to invest in South Africa are turned away because of the levels of crime in our country. And we believe as the IFP that this ANC government is not tough on crime. We've allowed mafia to penetrate every kind of industry, whether it's the building industry, the funeral industry, the tow truck industry, and the levels of corruption that we have, something that we don't see in many other countries in the world. And if we can stem corruption, especially at a government level, then we'll have more money available for the public.
Now moving to Kenya, the country's President William Ruto is in Washington as a part of a 3-day state visit to the United States, a first by any African leader in nearly 2 decades. US President Joe Biden rolled out the red carpet for his Kenyan counterpart as he seeks to catch up with the African continent. The visit comes amid Russia and China's rising influence in Africa, and that, experts believe, might have been America's motivation to schedule the visit at this time. China has been investing in Africa for over 2 decades now. A host of other players from West Asia have also gained ground, and that has likely made the US cautious of not losing its edge. Biden welcomed Ruto to the White House and joined him for a US-Kenya CEO summit.
And I bring you very warm greetings from the people of Kenya and our brothers and sisters from across the continent. And I undertake this state visit on the background of 60 years of solid friendship between the United States and Kenya.
The two leaders will hold formal talks, which will culminate in a lavish state dinner. Now, the talks will cover a wide range of topics, including debt relief for Kenya. Kenya has been grappling with acute liquidity challenges, and China is Kenya's biggest creditor. Meanwhile, credit ratings agency Fitch estimates that 1/3 of the Kenyan government's revenues will be spent just on interest payments this year. Amid this, Ruto said that talks with the US president will focus on developing a fairer financial system. Meanwhile, the US is also expected to designate Kenya as a major non-NATO ally. If that happens, Kenya will be the first sub-Saharan African country to receive the designation. It will also mark a significant upgrade in the relationship between the two nations and will likely give Washington a greater influence in East Africa.
Today, as we honor 60 years of ties between our countries, it's clear that our people are the true strength of this partnership and a partnership that's working well. Nowhere is it more important than in the realm of innovation. That's why we have so many business leaders around this table. From Silicon Valley to Silicon Savannah, our people have brought us forward and they've pioneered new technologies that are transforming millions of lives.
That's not all. The US president has also announced plans to schedule a visit to Africa next year after being re-elected, marking a very confident outlook for a second term in the White House. All of this as Biden says he is all in on Africa and all in with Africa. However, as he sets the stage for newer pledges and enhanced cooperation, the US president is yet to deliver on his previous promises. In December of 2022, Biden said that he would visit sub-Saharan Africa the following year. This would have made him the first US president to travel to the region in a decade. But 2 years later, he has yet to set foot on the continent. Shifting focus to the Democratic Republic of Congo, where intense fighting has resumed between the Congolese army and the M23 rebels. The army launched an offensive against positions of the M23 rebel group. A spokesperson for the army said that several localities have been recaptured from the rebels. Now, clashes were reported on several fronts in the North Kivu province in the east. Meanwhile, residents said that fighting was underway in several regions northwest of the provincial capital, Goma. In South Kivu province, bombings were reported in several regions. Now, the offensive comes as the M23 rebel group has amplified attacks in recent months. The March 23 movement, or M23, is one of the prominent insurgent groups active in the eastern region of the DRC. It is a primarily Tutsi-led rebel group which claims to be fighting for the interests of the Tutsi community. After laying dormant for several years, M23 began to re-emerge in late 2021. And ever since, it has made significant gains, capturing swathes of territory virtually encircling Goma. In April this year, the rebels captured the mining town of Rubeya. Now, Rubeya is a hotbed of strategic minerals, especially coltan, which is a key ingredient used in making mobile phones. The worsening violence has also led to an escalation in tensions between the Democratic Republic of Congo and Rwanda. The government of the DRC accuses Rwanda of supporting the M23 rebel groups, and the allegation is also echoed by Western countries. In fact, earlier this year, Rwanda's president defended the rebel group's cause. He said that the group exists because they've been denied their rights. However, he stopped short of answering whether Rwanda supported the rebels.
M23 is an organization born in and out of Congo. That's number one. Number two, these are Congolese. And you will hear even Congo admit it. Now, why do they exist? Why are they fighting? Why do they have arms? Is another question. It is also a simple question. They exist because they have been denied their rights as citizens of that country. They are called Tutsis of Rwanda.
Now, the years-long conflict has resulted in widespread nationwide displacement.
I left Kiwanja to come and live in Sake, thinking that Sake was safer and that I would find peace here. But there is no peace here either. We continue to suffer on a day-to-day, a life of suffering where I flee from war every day. I'm very angry.
As per the United Nations estimates, nearly 7 million people were internally displaced by the end of 2023. In North Kivu alone, about 2.5 million people were displaced. Amid the coups and the crises, there are many positive stories from Africa that often get overlooked, but not on this show. In our special segment, Resurgent Africa, we go back to Kenya to get you an inspiring story. A group of dedicated people are on a mission to rescue and rehabilitate birds of prey teetering on the brink of extinction. Experienced veterinarians and their teams are providing shelter and medical care to these majestic creatures and giving them a second chance at life. Our final report explains how.
In central Kenya, a crucial battle is being fought for the wildlife. A battle to save birds of prey from the brink of extinction. Dozens of veterinarians are dedicated to healing and protecting these magnificent creatures. The Soisambu Raptor Center is one of the few sanctuaries providing safety for these birds. According to a recent study by a US-based non-profit organization, the Peregrine Fund, Africa's raptor population has plummeted by 90% over the past 40 years.
You can go down a road today for maybe 200 kilometers and not see a single raptor. As you did that 20 years ago, you would have seen 100. it's that obvious a decline.
In these sanctuaries, raptors may stay for days or years. It all depends on their recovery needs. The staff frequently travel across Kenya to rescue injured birds. Sometimes even members of the public bring them to these sanctuaries. At least 70% of the birds eventually recover enough to be released back into the wild. The decline in raptors is attributed to multiple factors. Vultures and other scavengers often die from consuming poisoned livestock carcasses. It's a method used by cattle farmers to protect their herds from predators like lions. Additionally, there is deforestation which has destroyed their habitat. And the proliferation of power lines also have devastating impacts. Birds frequently perch on these power lines to hunt, resulting in fatal encounters. The Soisambu Reserve is also now marred by dozens of giant electricity pylons installed in recent years. Veterinarians are concerned about the rapid decrease in some species, fearing that the conservation efforts may be too late.
Some species are on such a precipitous decline that it doesn't matter if we do put in those conservation initiatives, they will go to extinction. We're too late.
Raptors, which can live up to 50 years, reproduce slowly. They only lay one egg annually. Conservation is further challenged by limited funding. Kenya prioritizes resources more towards prominent wildlife such as lions and elephants. But how much can these veterinarians do all by themselves? They say they need full assistance, permissions and finances from the government.
The status of vultures in Kenya is not good. Of the 8 species that occur in the country, 4 are critically endangered and the other 4 are endangered. So they depend on conservation measures for their survival.
Birds of prey also struggle with negative public perceptions. Experts say vultures are seen as ugly, unsightly, dirty and disgusting. These misconceptions have led to harmful practices. Some communities also fear owls and lappet-faced vultures due to superstitions. Despite the daunting decline in raptor numbers, veterinarians still remain hopeful. They say there's room for optimism, as some severely injured birds have made remarkable recoveries. Some even return to visit after being released. It demonstrates their resilience and the sanctuary's impact. The fight to save Africa's birds of prey continues. The dedicated efforts of these sanctuaries provide a glimmer of hope. Their work is proof that even in the face of overwhelming odds, every act of conservation is vital and can make a difference.
And that's it on the show for today. We will see you again tomorrow at the same time. Thank you for watching and goodbye.